Hey guys, it's Clayton Olson. In this video, I'm going to talk about self-love. I'm going to talk about ways, counterintuitive ways you can begin to love yourself fully and completely. Now, I can't promise on this video that I'm going to give you the tools and the insight to make that happen immediately, but I'm going to give you a counterintuitive way of looking at this idea of self-love that will perhaps help you get a little bit closer on this journey. Because when I think about self-love and I think about the clients that I work with, I realize that the reason that they're coming to me, the core issue behind all of the experiences that they're having externally, the situations that they're in, the places where they're feeling stuck, the places where they're feeling alone, where they're struggling, there is almost always something underpinning that experience that has to do with a compromised sense of self-love. So there's three different ways to look at this. And before I unpack them and go into each one, I'm going to just provide a little bit of context in how I've worked with people in the past and how some of the work that I do provides a bit of a model for how we can start to look at life. It provides like a context, or let's say a system for loving ourselves more. In neurolinguistic programming, which is my background, there is an exercise called Parts Auditorium. And in this Parts Auditorium process, how I work with folks is I have them imagine that they're standing in an auditorium and they are beginning to witness the different parts of themselves that are there, that are attending this conference while they are the, say, keynote speaker or senior consciousness. And in this Parts Auditorium, what's happening is we're working to identify perhaps the part of them that is sabotaging their relationships. Maybe it's the part of them that doesn't believe in themselves. We're also wanting to identify the creative part, or perhaps the part that feels helpless. And the beauty of beginning to break our personality into this constellation of parts rather than just saying, well, this is who I am, I'm a helpless person, or I'm a victim, is that it allows us to stand outside of these parts and see that we are not just one thing, but rather we are a myriad, a kaleidoscope of these different personalities that come together and allow us to operate in relationships, they allow us to operate in work, they allow us to operate in friendships and situations that require our survival. And oftentimes when we experience suffering, what is happening is there is a lack of unity internally. There's some type of lack of alignment. So there are certain parts that are not working together properly or gracefully, and that causes some type of cognitive dissonance. It causes the person to be against themselves, pit themselves against themselves, which then gets expressed into and projected onto people, life, and things outside of them. So when we do this internal work and we start to create these shifts internally, inside your internal landscape, it's almost like a miracle, but things begin to shift outside of you. That's the power of coaching. Now, I wanted to drop that as a context because that leads into this other type of work that is out there called The Work by a woman named Byron Katie. She's an amazing woman, and I highly recommend checking her out if you're interested in understanding how people project onto things and shadow work. So Byron Katie operates under the presupposition, or her work operates under the presupposition that whenever we are in relationship with somebody and we have some type of complaint or judgment or something that's not working, that's causing us suffering, the work is designed to take back our projections. Because what the idea is that we are consistently creating other people. We are creating other people. We are interacting with a story of who we think they are inside of our mind. I was doing some work with a client the other day, and we were doing something called perceptual positions, where we're stepping inside and out of different people in his life to get their experience. And he says to me, he's like, well, Clayton, he's like, this is just kind of a mind game, right? Because I don't really know what's going on over there. I don't really know how they are. And my response to that was, well, when are we not playing a mind game with ourselves? Aren't we only and always actually interacting with our interpretation of who we think that person is? Aren't we always interacting with our own creation, our own narrative of who we think they are? When is that not the case? In fact, when is it not the case that we are interacting with our own interpretation of who we think we are in life? Are we actually ever interacting with something that's not our interpretation or our interpretation of life itself? No, right? It's all a story that we are creating, and that story is either created accidentally from old programming that exists in the past, or we are intentionally creating it so it is aligned with us beginning to create the things that we do want as adults now, okay? So I want to just underline that we are always, for the sake of this video and really beginning to understand how this works, we are always interacting with our creations internally of what we think is happening outside of us. So that said, how do we begin to take our own self-love to another level? Well, I would say the invitation here is to start loving your creations. Start loving the things that you are creating. Start loving the creation of life that you are projecting out there, of what you think the world is. Start loving the creation of the people around you that you are creating them to be, and start loving the creation of yourself. Now let's drill into each one of those. So if we're talking about loving the creation of life that we are creating, what does that look like? Well, when I'm working with folks and we start to get down to the core beliefs that are underpinning some of the suffering that they're experiencing in their life, I find that there's a core belief, something that's at the very, very bottom about life, that life is unreliable, life is dangerous, life is out to get them, life is evil. At the core belief, when we begin to peel everything back and see, if that is the lens, if that is the glasses that we are wearing when we go out in the world, that is what we see. That is those are the things that we find evidence of. And then we show up in relationship to our own creation of life, which has us perhaps have elevated levels of anxiety, fear. It stops us from taking risk. It stops us from relying on people because we have this belief that we can't do that because something dangerous will happen. And again, if we are looking for it, we will find it. And yes, there is evidence out there that life is dangerous, and there's also evidence that life is the exact opposite of that. So what reality do we want to live in? Okay, so beginning to love yourself in this regard is beginning to examine those beliefs that you have about life being dangerous, about perhaps life being untrustworthy, and shifting that to something that you can actually be more in rapport with. Now, let's talk about people. I would say that the folks that I run across who are the most insecure, the people that have the least amount of love for themselves, are the ones that are talking crap consistently about others. And I wonder, is it because they don't love themselves that they're talking crap about others? Possibly. And is it also that maybe all of that judgment onto other people also has them go into a spiral, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where they love themselves less as well? I believe that's a possibility as well. Because if we're looking at it through this model, that we are only and always interacting with our projections of who we think people are, then if I am hating on other people and I am noticing the qualities in other people that I am not liking consistently, I'm actually not liking my creations. I'm not in rapport or accepting or loving my creations. Rather, I'm grappling with them inside consistently. Kind of like going back to the parts work I was talking about, where it's like we're grappling with these internal aspects of ourselves. We're not in rapport with them. So if we are hating other people, we are actually hating aspects of ourselves. Now, this does not mean that we condone people's behavior if it is not in line with our values. It does not mean that we are hanging out with them or that we're enabling behavior that is not in line with our integrity. What it does mean, though, is that we are just simply neutralizing the charge. if we are interacting with people and you're noticing places where you're getting hooked in, and attached to changing them, attached to talking crap about them or feeling powerless with them, there's something in there. That relationship is reflecting something that's going on in here that needs healing, or there's an opportunity for you to neutralize it and come into greater rapport with it. So the first one, when it comes to people, is work to neutralize those that you are judging negatively and let go and allow them to be where they're at. Allow them to be who they are. I can guarantee that if they have bad behavior or behavior that's outside of integrity, if you knew the full picture of how they got to that place and could understand the full ecology of what's actually happening and why they're showing up that way, it would be absolutely heartbreaking. So even in that thought, there can be more compassion that may be able to surface rather than this negative shit-talking judgment. And then the other aspect is, if you see people achieving things that you want, if you see people in the types of relationships you want, if you see people making the types of money that you want or having the type of body that you want, rather than seeing it as something that makes you jealous and envious and reflecting your own inadequacy, change it to, wow, that's possible, which means it's possible for me. What are the qualities that they must have in order to have and achieve those things that they've got? And in that practice, by noticing those qualities, we are actually noticing those qualities within us, going back to this projection idea that we're talking about. So it's these qualities that we can then foster and bring appreciation for. So I say switch from being envious to switching to having admiration for them, because what's really happening then is we're having admiration for those parts of ourselves. All right, and lastly, let's talk about us. Let's talk about the relationship in the creation, the way that you are creating yourself inside your own mind. There's two components here I'm gonna invite you to pay attention to. One, when you fail, make a mistake, have a regret, do something that is not in line with what you want, how do you treat yourself? How do you talk about yourself? Are you being a tyrant, a drill sergeant? Are you turning into a helpless person inside your own mind and taking on the mentality of a victim mindset? If so, the invitation is to begin to change that dialogue to one of, if I loved myself fully and completely, how would I talk to myself in this situation, right? Another way of saying it is, if I was parenting somebody who was in my situation, what would I tell them to let them know that I still love them? So how can we begin to massage the dialogue that we have with ourselves so that it can start to reflect a stronger, more healthy relationship? And then lastly is, if you're in a situation and you find yourself operating from a place of feeling wounded, operating from a place of not loving yourself, simply ask the question, if I did love myself fully and completely, how would I show up in this situation? What would I do? What would I say? How would I engage or not engage in this situation that would be a reflection of my self-love? Ponder that question and then act that way. Now, at first, it might feel incongruent. It might feel like, oh, well, I'm faking this. But here's the thing. Your actions and creating those reference experiences of becoming, of acting in line with who you want to be more and more creates that character. It creates that identity. Because again, we're playing mind games with ourselves. We are always interacting with a story of who we think we are, and you are the author, and you have the right to rewrite that story. And one of the ways to do it is through the way that you talk to yourself and beginning to act as if you are already there, so you start to experience what it's like to be in that place. My name's Clayton Olson, and if you found this video fascinating, subscribe to the channel, post a comment below, and if you're looking for a free guide to create a rock-solid relationship, click on the link below this video in the description. You can be dropped on my website, and you can put your email in, and I'll send that straight to your inbox. Thanks.